You're listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Franke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at in.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletters and subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can join us when we do this live. Jeff, how you doing this week?
I'm well, David.
Yeah?
How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. You know, it's a little later in the afternoon for a Thursday, and so it's like, all right, maybe a little sleepy. But we'll fire through. Anna, how you doing?
Good. I'm ready to get this thing knocked out. Let's do this.
Right? Let's knock it out. And also that extra hour and a half that we let it get a little cozier in the studio.
Yeah.
You know, it's definitely 90 more minutes of heat in here.
Should not have had a big lunch. It was a mistake.
Yeah. We need nap vessels in the office. But before we get started, we have a word from our new sponsor. Hi, I'm David Manti with Industrial Equipment News. Selecting the right hoses to keep your workers safe and facilities operational is crucial, but not all hoses are created equal. So, to help us work it out, Doug Nordstrom, hose product manager at Swagelok, is going to help us figure it out. Tuesday, May 23rd at 1 p.m. Central, please join us live. So, Doug, I heard that you can get lightning bolts in hoses. Is that true? And is that something we're going to discuss?
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people aren't aware of something called static dissipation, especially through softer material hoses like Teflon. It's a very common failure, and it actually is a lightning bolt that shoots through the hose, causing leakage.
No one wants that.
No one wants that.
And we're going to figure it out May 23rd. It's a Tuesday at 1 p.m. Central. Register now to join us live. That's right. May 23rd, 1 p.m., we're talking hoses. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I already know everything about hoses. And I thought the same thing too. They kink, and that's all you need to know about hoses. But it turns out there's a lot to know, including, Jeff, I didn't know this, but did you know that static electricity can cause lightning bolts inside of hoses?
I was not aware, David. Thank you for sharing.
No, me neither. It was like...
I think you just gave away the whole thing of the webinar.
No. That was like in the promo. It's like, hey, I bet you didn't know this, you know?
It's only about lightning.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
Internal lightning strikes.
Yeah.
That's right. Hose lightning. It's going to be a banger. And I hope you guys can join us May 23rd at 1. Register. The link is in the live chat, and it'll be in the description below. All right. Our first story this week. A sign of humans' demise. Brewer unveils beer that made itself. German brewer Beck's recently unveiled Autonomous, a limited edition beer marking the company's 150th anniversary. Beck's used AI, specifically ChatBot or ChatGPT and San Francisco AI lab Midjourney to generate the new beer. Everything from the recipe all the way through the final logo design, packaging, and advertising was created by AI. Some suggested that it shows how, quote, artificial intelligence and humans can work together to revolutionize the beverage world. Well, Autonomous sold out of the, quote, beer that made itself, but they only made 450 of them. I mean, you would think AI might have some better input on demand. Jeff, Jonathan Williams on our website says he's totally burnt out by the AI hype already. Are you?
No, I think there's some interesting developments still out there as far as AI goes.
Oh, yeah.
I think this was an interesting sort of, would you call it a case study? I don't know, a preliminary application.
Like
whatever,
a proof of concept
whatever
almost.
You want to say.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting when you deal with a food product just because so much of that, to me, feels like it's on user preferences and taste. I think there's a little bit of, there needs to be, I guess, in my opinion, a little bit more of a human
A little more
input
art. A little more
to
art to the
that,
science.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought it was interesting, especially something that artificial intelligence can't taste, you know, if you're looking at a beer. So yeah, it's sort of an interesting idea or concept. I think it does show how product development could potentially be streamlined using AI. That's a little scary because I think we'd like to think more innovation is going to come from human input than machine.
Yeah.
So not sure how I feel about that. But it does bring AI again into the forefront in just terms of discussing what are the best applications for it. You know, we ran an article not too long ago, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, where Elon Musk and some other very smart people kind of told everybody to pump the brakes a little bit when it comes to AI.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how we continue to embrace or run from this technology and find the right applications for it. I'm really curious to know how this beer tasted.
Yeah.
There hasn't been any reports on that. And I think one thing, maybe in case there is anybody really terrified by this, AI was not responsible for harvesting the hops or collecting the water. Humans actually were in charge of production and quality control. So it wasn't completely that, but obviously a big part of it. And you think you're going to go through this a little bit, the sort of the conversation, if you will, that took place was kind of interesting to see too.
Yeah, fewer and fewer humans being involved in the process though. Anna, we were kind of, let's say, singing the praises of the beer connoisseurs of the world. So did AI just harvest all of the social media on what are the best reviewed beers, create some super recipe to create Beck's autonomous beer?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of their wheelhouse, right? Is just combing the internet.
Yeah.
Scraping the internet.
The internet's super searcher.
I did appreciate, I think, Jeff, you were kind of alluding to this, but like how they're like, it made the entire beer all the way from the recipe to and then the marketing. Like, okay.
Skipped a couple things.
Right. Like there's a few things that we didn't mention in there. But anyway, yes, I agree with you that there's been some barriers around AI as it pertains to what are the best use cases, right? I think we're seeing a little bit less hesitancy around AI in general, but also in the food industry specifically. There was a lot of time where AI was viewed with a lot of mistrust, like robots are going to take my job kind of mistrust, or sentient AI robot will murder us all. That whole thing. I think, and that's still there a little bit, but I think that's because it's been fueled by the unknown and like kind of a lack of understanding of the business benefits. First and foremost, because I think for a long time that wasn't really transparent. It was like AI is the future, but for manufacturers, they're like, well, what does that even mean? I don't see how this would be useful in my business, but now you're seeing a little bit more of companies apply some of these AI principles in things like forecasting and demand gen, stuff that's like really supply chain related, where, you know, obviously you can never predict demand, but if you have the data, like all this data, volumes and volumes of data, you can get a lot more accurate with that. So I think like predictive AI, while it's still guesswork, it is actually providing some value to manufacturers, which is interesting. And as businesses, I think, see the application of AI tools, internally and what they do at work, those same people go home at night and they monkey around with these very popular tools like Chat GPT and stuff like that. So it's just like anything else, I think, right? Like B2B follows the consumer acceptance that's been forged through B2C. We saw that with like procurement, right? E-commerce. And so eventually there is a turning point. And right now I think we're not really there yet with AI for sure, but like it is coming.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, as an accessory too, to these roles that humans have traditionally had and in roles that are challenging to humans, right? Like those that involve like a lot of data. And in a world where we have a labor shortage that I think based on demographics might not go away, then some of these types of tools, I think they need to see some prime time and their acceptance will grow. I'm a proponent of regulating AI, don't get me wrong. And I do actually think that some of the stuff that Elon Musk and his counterparts are saying around, the CEO of Google, I think, saying about AI and regulation, I actually think that that's going to help reduce some of the overall fears that people have of AI and maybe help them kind of confront this tech as being very useful to them and not something that they should be afraid of. But yeah, I do think that regulation is going to have to be part of that. But.
It will have to be part of it. And it'll be good that AI will be able to reflect on conversations like this as sort of like a time, like a piece of nostalgia when it shows the timeline of the human's obsolescence. You know,
True,
where they
yeah.
could be like, remember early on when they thought, oh man, what a cute toy that we can use to make money.
So they'll point to you because you've proven that you are a subservient to any robotic, mechanical overlord. You're spared, but Anna and I are pretty much done.
Gone. Dunzo. You might have already been replaced.
Well, let me just compliment ChatGPT or the AI that designed this can, because that is one of the coolest looking beer cans I've ever seen.
Well, so, I mean, these are real world examples of how this is going to change the ways that we live and work in the future. The biggest part of this that struck me was that none of this was a human idea. So I just want to run through the process a little bit. And Bex kind of spelled it out on their website. So the first step, the people at Bex sat down with AI and had, quote, a good chat. They told the AI about the company's pioneering spirit, its ambition, and asked for ideas to celebrate its 150th anniversary. After this chat, the AI gave the beer maker the idea to make an anniversary beer entirely with AI. And I mean, let's be honest, that's not a reach. Like, they told the beer maker to celebrate its beer anniversary with beer.
Your pioneering spirit. See, AI is a yes man.
That's right.
It's not going to challenge you.
So the company asked AI for the recipe, which it made. It came up with the name, autonomous, again, reach. Designed the logo, the can, designed the website, created the tagline, the beer that made itself, built the ad campaign, delivered the posters, billboards, and social media ads, wrote and voiced its own radio ad, wrote a commercial script for the film that was used verbatim, a commercial script to film for the ad, which was filmed verbatim, and identified influencers as well as the language for them to use. Now, it's a little creepy how they used AI to create this entire marketing plan, and with deliverables like posters, billboards, social media, that all worked. That was incredible. And, you know, we've been talking. What? I mean, they sold out of all 450 cans.
Yeah, but like, we don't know that it worked because all of this is contingent on the fact that the public knows that it was built by AI. So that's what worked, right?
So the gimmick worked.
It functioned.
Okay.
Right. I don't know that like the ads sell the beer if nobody knows that. We don't know that. You know?
But I mean, Jeff just said, what a cool looking can. I mean, he didn't know. He didn't say it's a cool looking can for AI.
He did know, though.
I'm just saying that I recently talked to somebody that's in the packaging industry. They are going to be launching a graphic design arm of packaging because it's something that small businesses just don't have access to. And it might be that there are no designers in that department in the near future because they'll just use AI to create packaging superior to what, you know, people believe a human could do. And that's, I don't know, crazy and a little bit scary to me.
Yeah, that, again, I think you lose some of that artistic elements to it and that human connection. I don't know if we've got AI copying AI or feeding off of AI at some point, we're going to get real vanilla.
Yeah.
You know, I think there still takes some original processing there to push things forward.
Real vanilla. And do you think our culture and industry are just going to gloss over how all of this AI is built off of essentially creating new things by stealing the ideas of like other people?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's like, already off the table.
I mean, I think like, you know, obviously like at some point AI is going to be capable of doing a lot of things that humans do. And if the result is like every single person no longer has a job and everyone's miserable and poor, like, I don't know. What is that going to make everyone happy and like buy those products? Like, no, like, you know, there has to be like a happy medium here. People, maybe this is like, maybe people who use humans instead of AI eventually will be like the ESG people of today who are like
human created.
We
made
use humans,
by
man.
humans for humans.
Yeah, that's a selling point, right?
So this is either the prequel to WALL-E or like Terminator?
I don't know which one. Yeah.
Both? I mean, we are on a path to boneless humans on floating pads. Am I wrong?
You're wrong. Here's the thing. For this to really grab on, it has to be better. So for this to understand how successful this would have been, you should have put the AI against a real person or a real product development team.
Right, agreed.
And see which beer tasted better, which can looked cooler, which one was more cost effective. We say that was a really cool looking can because they only had to make 450 of them and there weren't any cost controls in there.
Yeah.
So once the playing field is leveled a little bit, that's when we'll know where we can take this. As far as our industry goes and manufacturing, there's a lot of other applications for this that are more that Anna touched on in terms of predictive maintenance and supply chain forecasting, things like that.
Yeah, there's actually a piece that Nolan Beilstein put together on infomag.com. It's on the homepage right now. How predictive procurement affected a chemical producer's MRO, and that's a really interesting look at how I think it's Dover Chemical used AI for MRO procurement, and it's a really good piece. You should check it out. All right. Our next most popular story. Paper mill shuts down to fight fungal infection. As we discussed last week, the Billerud paper mill has a mycosis problem. And this week, a contract worker at the Escanaba, Michigan paper mill died from a fungal infection. The death forced the business to temporarily close for a deep cleaning. The death was announced last Friday after the worker died as a result of blastomycosis infection. The mill, which employs more than 800 people, will close for up to 3 weeks for scrubbing after authorities confirmed at least 21 cases of blastomycosis among workers since March and dozens of more probable cause cases. The mill will undergo, quote, deep cleaning in high traffic areas through the mill, as well as vent inspections, filter replacements, and tests on raw materials. An industrial outbreak of the fungus has not been documented anywhere else in the United States. Of the 97 total cases, about a dozen have required hospitalization, and all 97 are either employees, contractors, or visitors of the paper mill. Jeff, part of this was frustrating for me because as we discussed this topic last week, some of these seemed like common sense, right? Deep cleaning, vent inspections, filter replacements, testing raw materials. What did you think in that it took a death to sort of force the paper mill to make the next step forward, take the next step forward?
Obviously, I think hindsight is 20/20 here a little bit. Obviously, it's horrible that that's what it took to get to this point in terms of what the actions that were taken. So I don't know how to react to that because at the same time, employees were not voicing a ton of concern in terms of coming into the facility. Yeah. There was not a collective outcry in terms of this isn't fair.
Yeah, no union push.
Yeah, so you never want to just overlook when there's a loss of life here. But at the same time, I can appreciate everyone involved in the situation and the decisions that were made. Now, looking at some of the information that Billerud put out, there was one line that really caught my attention. There are a couple things. I just want to read this off their FAQs in response to what was going on at the facility and what we should know. And it said, the impact is expected to be limited since the production. They're looking at things from a financial perspective.
Yeah,
let me clarify.
Understood.
The impact is expected to be limited since the production at the Escanaba mill was already being adjusted to meet current market demand. That's kind of a weird statement to me. Yeah. Because if what you're telling 800 employees as well as everybody else in the community is we're going to be shutting down for 3 weeks. Now, just to offer some perspective, and this is on their site as well, this facility puts out over 730 tons of paper every year. 3 weeks is 42 million tons of paper products. That seems like a big deal.
Yeah.
And if you read, now I think the statement is primarily focused on stockholders, other people who have financial vested interest in Billerud. But at the same time, that's unnerving.
Yeah, a little.
It's like, hey, don't worry about it. We're just going to shut down for 3 weeks and it won't impact anything. It should be impacting something. If this facility is important to their production and what they're putting out the door, that threw me a little bit. And I don't think that's as calming to employees, unless I'm just overthinking it, as you'd want it to be.
I mean, we know what being adjusted to meet current market demand means. Yeah.
The other thing that I just wanted to point out that I thought was important is that they're going to continue to offer employees pay and benefits throughout the idle period. That was something I was curious about to see how the employees were going to be taken care of. So again, an interesting combination of responses from Billerud there. I think they are genuine in terms of they want to take care of their people and make sure that everything is safe before they bring people back. But at the same time, to act like it's not a big deal to be shut down for 3 weeks, I don't like that.
Yeah. Anna, do you feel like they will go through such a deep clean over these 3 weeks, or is it just going to be are they going to hit it with some Febreze and call it good?
Yeah, the cleaning part, I was not quite, I don't know. Okay, so, obviously this is interesting because like literally last week while we were filming the podcast, we were talking about this factory. And I think we had a lot of concerns about it operating and what that meant for the employees. And then literally while we were recording was when they made this announcement that they were shutting down for up to 3 weeks. I think we were in agreement last week that it seems like the plant is trying to do what they can to make this work, to try to figure out what's happening here. I think a shutdown scenario was probably warranted at this point. But yeah, the cleaning part was a little bit concerning to me. I know they don't know where this is coming from, but it did harken back to me. Do you remember the term cleaning theater that was coined, I think, during the pandemic?
Okay.
Where even when it became pretty clear scientifically that COVID was not really being spread through surface contact, businesses and public places continued to put great effort into showing that they were constantly spraying things down and sanitizing, and almost to the point where scientists were like, there's a placebo effect to that because it makes people feel better about being there, but it's not really achieving anything in terms of mitigation of COVID because we know it was transmitted in other ways. People are just breathing on each other, right?
Yeah. Could I actually interject my favorite piece of cleaning theater? It was in our own office, and I don't know if you guys remember this, where early on when we came back, somebody was coughing in the office and decided to go home because it was at that time where a cough or a sneeze, and it was like, I'll get out. I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm out. Don't worry about it. And as this person was walking out of the office, somebody else followed him out with spraying Lysol, all the way out the door, in the office, through the hallway, and even sprayed outside because it's like, hey, why not bleach outside?
Yeah.
But sorry, that was my favorite piece of cleaning theater.
I don't know. It was pretty funny though. So I don't know. That's to me, it's like, it feels like maybe that's what's happening here because they don't know what's happening. My understanding of how blastomycosis is, how you are infected with these spores, is that you must breathe them in. So most of the time that's coming from organic material, trees or brush or dirt. So obviously it could be the environment, but it also could be the need for some sort of massive filtration system change out, or an indoor air quality system that is a little bit more than walking around with a mop. I don't know. Just deep cleaning, scrubbing, those words were used multiple times in this report. And that to me suggested this element of theater. Well, we're doing something about it. This is what we're doing. More importantly, these other steps, I don't know, tests on raw materials, maybe those are the important things. I'm hoping that they were doing these already.
Yeah.
It's hard to know, but that's the stuff that's going to get at the root cause here. Just wiping some things down with Lysol, that's not going to save anybody's life in this case.
No, I think the only way to protect the paper mill is to kind of go corner to corner, clean everything down, document that how everything has been cleaned, and hopefully they can figure out what the source is. But without figuring out the source, Jeff, do you see a possible mask mandate at the mill until it's either identified or, just because you start playing with people's lives and you got to protect your employees and the business.
No, it's definitely a tightrope to walk here in terms of how you still want to give people the right to earn a living, but keep them safe. And this one is so weird. Quite honestly, when it's gotten to this point, the cleaning, I think, is more of a reassuring element, kind of what Anna was talking about. You have to figure out where this came from and how it got in there. Yeah. That is the biggest, most important part of this whole process.
Yeah.
Until that's figured out, boy, I would have a hard time with a clear conscience really opening up full production at this facility.
So the mill produces paper that's found in magazines, catalogs, books, and other products. And Jeff, when you mention those numbers, I mean, there's already a paper cost problem in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, we know it.
Yeah.
We print magazines. We see it. We
Yeah,
see it
and
every other month.
shortages.
Yeah.
Like since the pandemic shortages. So
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I can't imagine that, whatever they have in terms of supply at the mill, they could ship anywhere else or anyone would be willing to take because of its potential contamination. So we talked about how they offered N95 protective masks as the investigation of the outbreak and cleaning ensued. Company officials said that they were following the recommendations of public health and occupational safety authorities. So, I mean, kind of like what we said last week, they were doing the best they could based off the information they had. I did find it interesting that unions finally started doing something about it. On Saturday, the United Steelworkers Union called for testing and cleaning, not just of this mill, but of all paper mills across the industry. Kind of a big swing, but a really good time to take it. The union said it is working with authorities on the search to determine the precise source of the outbreak. Hopefully, they find it soon. Our next most popular story this week, Boeing MAX production could be slowed over part problem. On Thursday, Boeing said a, quote, significant number of 737 MAX planes could be delayed because of questionable work performed on the fuselages. According to Boeing, Spirit Aerosystems used a non-standard manufacturing process during installation of fittings near the back of the planes. Aircraft parts must be made and installed to exact federal standards. Boeing stresses that there isn't an immediate safety issue and planes already in the air can continue operating safely. But now the company must inspect planes and replace fittings as necessary. Jeff, the FAA confirmed that there is no immediate safety issue. So there's no immediate safety issue, but they don't know all the planes that have problems with the fittings. I mean, it's hard for Boeing to catch a break these days.
Yeah, it just, what I put in the notes here, it seems like the universe is just piling on at this point. They're just figuring out new stuff. And to me, whenever you have to put out a press release or information that says a non-standard manufacturing process, that's kind of scary. Okay. And I think they need to define that and spell that out a little bit more. The way I understand it is basically Boeing told the FAA, this is how this part's going to go on there, and Spirit did it a different way.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean the part is bad, doesn't mean it's just not matching up and not syncing, which quite honestly is a huge concern because what you've got is two aerospace giants here who are not communicating clearly enough on what is obviously a big deal. Yes, it's one or two parts out of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of parts on these planes. But obviously, it's enough to cause these types of concerns. We have to re-inspect and re-maintain all these aircraft. And obviously, Boeing does not need this because regardless of the safety impacts, it's another hit on their reputation. It's another thing that calls into question what they're doing and how they're doing it. It's bad for their leadership. It's bad for their stock price. And you're looking at a company that has had 2 profitable quarters in the last 4 years. Okay. Just in U.S. manufacturing and all the suppliers that Boeing works with, they need to keep pumping out planes. This is what's good for our ecosystem here. So this is concerning again, especially if it's shining a light on the fact that they're not communicating with one of their most prominent and most important suppliers.
Yeah. Bad for Boeing stock, worse for Spirit stock. That was another thing that stood out to me. Is this just a question of safety and quality, or is it just compliance? And also, if you're a Boeing supplier in Spirit Aerosystems, Anna, and you change how you do things, how do you not communicate that? I mean, these are both legacy companies well established in aerospace, right? How do you not know that if you change the way you screw something in or put something on, that there have to be like regulatory changes in order to make that okay?
Yeah, and Spirit used to be owned by Boeing. They have been a key Boeing supplier for a very long time. They say that they have processes in place to address these types of production issues upon identification. They say they're following that process. They're working to resolve the issue. I agree it's bad for Boeing. They were getting off to a good start this year, and that's too bad. It's also really bad for Spirit. If you guys remember, Spirit's had a tough couple of years as well. So within days of this story breaking, several law firms have announced investigations into Spirit Aerospace on behalf of investors. They're basically concerned that the company violated security laws. I think on the news of the part errors,
By disclosing this?
Well, I think maybe by not disclosing it.
Oh, okay.
Because when the news came out of the part errors, their stock dropped like 21%, which is a lot.
Yeah.
So we'll see where any of that stuff goes. I don't know. The other thing I think is, if you recall, Spirit laid off a massive number of employees during the pandemic, and their problems had started even before that, really in lockstep with Boeing's and the grounding of the MAX jets. More than half of Spirit's revenue reportedly comes from the production of 737 components. So if you think about that, that grounding really impacted them as much as it was impacting Boeing. They were on shaky ground for a while there. And I always wonder when we see an issue of manufacturing quality or like somebody just really flub a process like this, because, like non-compliant procedures, to me, that indicates
like a shortcut?
Like a shortcut or a lack of understanding or a lack of training related to process. And I'm wondering if we aren't seeing some of the impacts of those layoffs now come to fruition here, because, we've talked about this a lot before. I think companies tend to position their layoffs as cost-cutting techniques that can be temporary and reversible. And I think that in theory that's true, but it's easy to overlook the fact that when you send your seasoned employees out the door, the ones who know the absolute most about your processes, you take a big gamble, because when you're ready to get back and ramped up again, it's not like you just call those same people back, right?
Yeah, they're like, oh, I'd love to come back.
Right, yeah. Like, I've been waiting for this call. I still have all my notes. I am ready to go, right?
I kept a diary of all my tribal knowledge. Right. I'm happy to pass along to the person you're going to replace me with.
Exactly. And so, I think we've seen mistakes like this before in auto production, where it doesn't take much of a gap in knowledge to create this, massive ramification, recalls, like all these horrible things that occur and cost these companies a tremendous amount of money, not to mention a reputation hit. The point I'm trying to make here is that workers are not interchangeable. You cannot get all that knowledge back after you let it go. And I think that's an important consideration here, because while they have not said that that's the case, it's really hard to think that that wasn't somehow a factor, right? Is people on the production line maybe not knowing what they were doing.
A lot of times on the podcast, we talk about the importance of supplier diversification. And, while Spirit makes fuselages for all MAX jets, it's not the only supplier for these fittings. So at least the MAX 9 is not affected. Just reinforcing, the potential benefit of protecting yourself that way. Spirit, quote, identified the quality issue on the rear section of some MAX fuselages and then told Boeing. Again, Boeing doesn't even know how many planes are affected because the issue was just discovered. And that is a bold thing for Boeing to say. And I guess I don't want to say just wait and see, but hopefully it's easily identifiable and they can figure out what needs to be adjusted.
Well, it puts the airlines in a really weird spot too if they've got these planes, especially if they were just delivered. Yeah. They're finally seeing this huge investment come to fruition, and now they're kind of stuck in limbo too in terms of, well, do we listen to Boeing?
Yeah. Well, like you've already, how many issues have been associated with the MAX jets, right? And then they say, hey, we got another problem with the MAX jets, but wait, you're flying them? No, you're probably still fine to keep flying them.
What's the thing? 5 years ago, if Boeing told American Airlines something, they'd be like, yeah, you're right. We're going to take your orders and follow your orders on this one. Now, you still feel that confident?
Yeah. A fitting? Come on, Boeing. And just like, no, it wasn't us. It was Spirit. It's like, come on. You got to be accountable. All right.
Just use the Tommy Lee Jones line. I don't care.
Oh, my goodness.
From The Fugitive.
I know. I love that movie. Like, too much. Our next most popular story. Polestar EV skips rear window. On Tuesday, Swedish EV car maker Polestar unveiled the Polestar 4, a new electric SUV coupe. The 4 will be the company's fastest production car to date and go 0 to 60 in less than 3.8 seconds. The Polestar 4's design pays particular attention to passenger comfort, including headroom. So as part of this new, quote, what they're calling immersive rear occupant experience, the company nixed the rear window. We're going to cut out that back window so you can have an immersive rear occupant experience. Instead, passengers are going to be cocooned in an intimate environment, which it has reclining seats, so sounds kind of nice. In your little cocoon, your little reclined cocoon with no window to outside. The car also has adjustable ambient lighting inspired by the solar system. And again, that sounds nice. So the passengers still see a little sun. The car has a full-length glass roof with optional electrochromic functionality that lets drivers make the roof either transparent or black out the sun entirely for their passengers. Just that's how you know whether or not the Uber's mad at you. It's like they slowly black out the sun. Just like, oh, I know, I'm getting 3 stars on this one. Sorry, bud. Instead of a rear view mirror, the driver uses a high-def screen that is streaming a real-time feed from a roof-mounted rear camera. The car is built to be more sustainable with floor carpets made partially of reclaimed fishing nets and interior vinyl that's made from pine oil instead of crude oil. The Polestar 4 is going to start at about $60,000, and the company plans to start production in South Carolina next year to serve both U.S. and European markets. Jeff, last week, Anna told us that 4 out of 10 people in America think their next car could be an EV. Do you think it'll be a Polestar 4?
I'm not so confident of that, but I'll circle back to Polestar as a company. Okay. I want to talk about this vehicle first. Now, I understand they're trying to stand out a little bit here and trying to use all of this wonderful terminology. I do not want to be in a moving cocoon. That does not sound at all appealing or comfortable, or I don't know. I don't like the way they've described the interior of this vehicle at all. It makes me feel so uncomfortable.
Right? It's like you're automatically claustrophobic. Just
like I just want to be able to look outside. Like I'm used to something being able, if it's coming from the back, I want to be able to see it. Yeah. I don't know. That felt weird. The other thing I thought was weird when they talked about the lighting, inspired by the solar system.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of like saying your floor is inspired by the earth?
I mean, I guess. Maybe it's
where else is light going to come from?
Maybe it's those. They just kind of stick a bunch of those glow in the dark stars on the ceiling. You know?
I don't know. That feel weird. The other thing is, I would really need to get used to not having a rear view mirror.
Yeah.
And having a display. Now, long term, it may be better visually in terms of being able to see what's out in front of you. But initially, that is going to be really weird to look at a camera feed as opposed to a mirror. That would take a lot of getting used to.
You're talking about one of the biggest points for me is because, I don't know, do both of your cars have the rear camera, the backup camera?
Yes.
How many times is that unusable in Wisconsin due to the elements? You know, like, I mean, for me, anytime I gas up, I use the window cleaner to clean off that camera because you can't see out of the thing. Yeah. And I mean, for me, that was the biggest thing where even if the car is frosted and I have that little just slice of it cleaned off to see through it, I trust that more than I trust a real-time camera. I don't know.
Well, I think that's also just a paradigm shift. Like that's how we grew up, learning how to drive was looking over your shoulder. Yeah. I don't really look at that camera probably as much as I should. I'm always looking over my shoulder and stopping and doing like I always did before.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I do want to circle back and talk about Polestar as a company a little bit, but I know Anna's got some thoughts on the vehicle as well.
Anna, are they positive thoughts?
I wasn't crazy about this one. I agree that the design is a little bit weird to me. Like, and definitely, like we've talked in the past about how some of these new features and tech need to come with an instruction manual, or you need to
have training.
Sit down with somebody to teach you how to use it, because it's a great point about the winter weather. You see how many people don't even scrape off the top of their car when they're flying down the highway and like big sheets of ice are flying off. Like, I don't know. I mean, there's no backup solution if your camera's not working or if you don't know how to use the dashboard or whatever. So I don't know.
If the camera isn't working, you just can't see.
You can't see it all.
And it's important to see what's behind you.
Right. You know, like hopefully this thing is easy to operate, because if it's not, then people are going to make some mistakes. And then, you know, Polestar is going to get the Tesla treatment for sure on that.
Oh, yeah.
Which is not what they want, right? But no, I think for me, and based on some of the comments I saw on our website, others might agree with this, but I think it kind of comes down to just because you can design it doesn't mean that people want it. And sitting in the backseat of a vehicle is not the best experience to begin with. Taking away the windows is a very weird play because that's like the only thing that you have.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand the appeal of that personally. Like, you know, I mean, like hearses also don't have windows in the back. Like, I don't want to ride around in the back of one, you know, like, I don't know. It's
a cocoon.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Kids these days don't want to look out the window. They want to stare at their device in a dark cocoon.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this leads to my next point, which is I feel like some of the latest trends really go overboard on their futuristic treatment of like kids love their screens and all that stuff. Like that doesn't mean that kids only love their screens. And so I don't know. I like to create this ambient space with no real sunlight, it just kind of makes me feel sad. And I know that they have ambitions, Polestar, of being this like premium brand. So maybe they think that no one's actually going to be in this backseat. Like it's more about being like the most unique sports car possible visually, in which case, okay. But like, I don't love the lack of windows. And again, like it just, to me, it's like a bunch of middle-aged people in a boardroom being like, the kids, this is what the kids like. Let's give the kids what they want. But we don't have to like hurdle ourselves towards this dystopian future where everyone is like in the dark with like artificial lighting, staring at a screen, waiting to die. I don't know.
In defense of the dark. So this concept really reminds me of my mother's old station wagon that had an oil leaking problem. And it leaked so much oil out the exhaust that it blacked out the entire back window and side windows.
Whoa.
But, you know, kids loved sitting in the back seat of that station wagon so you could look back, you know. But after it started leaking, you couldn't see out the back window. So that was a great time for, you know, us to enrich our imaginations, mostly just fight. But, you know, there could be some positives in terms of letting, you know, the kids really expand their imaginations and minds in this cocoon.
Self-isolated cocoon.
Oh, terrible.
Jeff, I want to use John's quote again. John Williams he was killing it on the website this week. He says, and I believe you might reinforce this, sounds like a load of malarkey to me.
Great word.
I know.
Malarkey. Way to bring that one back.
I stood up and clapped at my desk.
It does, though. It does, John.
I agree. I think Polestar itself as a company is in kind of an interesting position. You know, we mentioned this in the story. You brought it out in the script for the video. They sold just over 51,000 vehicles last year. That was a 55% jump. Or excuse me, that was an 80% jump from the year previous. They want to increase sales by another 55% to get up to 80,000 vehicles. So it feels like they're trending in the right direction here. But here's what's unique. So they're owned by Volvo, Swedish company, whose parent company is Chinese.
Yeah, Geely.
They want to start manufacturing in South Carolina next year as part of this whole ramp up to get to scale and be a major player within the EV marketplace. How is all those sanctions that are going on right now, how is that going to impact their expansion into South Carolina and try to get into the U.S. market?
No tax credits.
If we're looking at an EV and all the restrictions that are being placed in terms of what can be shared with minerals and chips and everything else, I don't know. That's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. Yeah. Because to scale up, it's nice to see you went from whatever to 51 and you want to get to 80. Tesla sold 1.3 million EVs last year. So you're not a player yet. Okay. So there's a lot of political factors that are going to go into this, as well as some of the design stuff we just talked about that we're going, there's better options. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how Polestar comes together here.
It'll be interesting to see how it's viewed. Is it viewed as a Swedish car maker because of the division, or is it viewed as a Chinese company? One thing that stood out to me too is how Polestar is using this sort of architecture that Geely has streamlined, talking about EVs being very automated. And basically everything under the hood of their EVs is the same, except, the cocoons that differentiate some of their brands. I wanted to just note a few things because I wasn't able to mention it in the script as much because Polestar has done so much when it comes to sustainability. One is they want better supply chain transparency, like blockchain traceability for risk materials in the batteries. Thought that was awesome. The full life cycle assessment will be published to show each individual car's true carbon footprint. Again, I think that is a selling point. Other things that they did inside the car, they're using a monomaterial approach to interior materials where all layers of each component are produced from the same base material. Now, this is going to make them more recyclable and cutting out the need to remove incompatible materials before they're recycled.
Interesting.
Yeah. New interior materials will also include a tailored knit textile, which consists of 100% recycled PET, along with bio-attributed microtech vinyl and animal welfare secured Napa leather upholsteries. So, sometimes we've seen like the Fisker Automotives, and we've seen drips and drabs of recyclability in a car's interior, and they kind of just really went for it here. This tailored knit upholstery is a new technique that is 100% recycled polyester, and the material and design was created by Polestar's designers as well as the Swedish School of Textiles, and it is made to fit, producing no offcuts and to reduce overall waste. So I really appreciated everything they did from a sustainability standpoint, and the fact that they're essentially going to give you a sustainability report card with every car. I think that matters to people.
What is animal welfare secured Napa leather?
It is really hard to figure out because every time I looked into it, I'm like, so does that mean it's not animal? It's like, no, it's still lamb.
It's still lamb, but we knocked it over the head with a bat.
No, it's still lamb, but it had a great life before it was turned into a seat.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it was animal welfare secured.
Greenwashing.
Did you say greenwashing?
I was coughing.
Right? Just like, okay, there are a couple of things we can't get around. We're still killing sheep. Sorry. You know what? We got a lot of fishnets out of the ocean. We're still killing sheep.
Died of natural causes.
Yeah, I guess.
It was not harvested.
Yeah, just a
oh my goodness.
bunch of lambs dying of natural causes.
Well, let's talk about cows that died of unnatural causes. Ooh. Our most popular story this week. Dairy farm explosion kills 18,000 cows. An explosion at a Texas dairy farm injured one person and killed nearly 20,000 cows. The blast happened at the South Fork Dairy near the town of Dimmitt, where machinery ignited methane gas. Local officials said the machine likely at fault is a, quote, honey badger that works like a vacuum for removing water and manure. A manure vacuum can be pulled by a tractor or mounted on a truck, and it's designed to span the width of the lanes of a dairy farm and reduce the amount of time and manpower that it takes to keep everything clean. It really sheds light on the fact, this story in particular really sheds light on the fact that barn fires kill thousands of animals every year. According to the Animal Welfare Institute, nearly 6.5 million animals have been killed in barn fires since 2013. The overwhelming majority of those animals are birds, with chickens accounting for more than 6 million deaths during that time period. These fatal barn fires occur in states with colder weather. New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin are your top 5 in that order. Jeff, this story, and if you saw the footage and the photos from it, first of all, it is incredible that only one person was critically injured, and I believe she's out of the hospital. But it is an incredible loss of livestock.
Yeah, it's a crazy event. And I think the thing that got me is when they showed some of the images of the damage, just the expanse of these facilities. Oh, yeah. I want to circle back to that. Just to offer a little more perspective on the scale of this disaster, borrowing from the HudsonReporter.com here, the 18,000 cows killed in the fire account for approximately 90% of the dairy farm's total herd. So there's another 1,000 cows in this facility yet.
Yeah.
To put some scale of the tragedy into perspective, the number of cows killed would cover 26 football fields if the animals stood 3 to 4 feet apart. Financial losses resulting from the incident could reach tens of millions of dollars, and that's excluding destruction of equipment and buildings. So just these animals, tens of millions of dollars. I mean, it's just kind of unfathomable. You see that number, and it's hard to even really register. I think one of the things that this really points to, or at least it did for me, is just the growth of these factory farms and the fact that OSHA, and I want to talk about OSHA a little bit more, but I'll save that till later. With all of the additional responsibilities that we already heap on OSHA, asking them to get to all these factory farms and make sure they're up to code and stuff, it's a daunting task, but I think it's becoming more and more important. Reason being, when we look at stats from the USDA, these factory farms, these large farms, we're talking probably over $1 million or more, they represent 5% of total number of facilities or farming locations in the U.S. They are also responsible for 65% of total production. Coming in agricultural production. So when you look at that scale, it reinforces the prominence that they play in our supply chain, in our food supply, and now how important they're becoming from a safety perspective. The fallout from this and losing all of these animals in this facility, that's going to be felt throughout the supply chain, not just by this business. It's going to impact a lot of different local distributors. It's going to impact a lot of local retailers and just throughout the country. So it's incredible, the growth of this factory farming dynamic. We've talked about this before, but just to offer another stat, 99% of all the poultry, beef, and pork that we consume comes from a factory farm. So we hear about a lot of these farm-to-table initiatives and everything else. It's not putting a dent into the role that these huge facilities are playing. And when you look at the size of these, I'll call them a barn. I don't know if that's even the right terminology.
It's an industrial facility with
I mean, it's enormous. And it's done from an efficiency perspective because, you know what? We like lower prices on all the meat that's coming out of them. But it does seem like we're at a point now when we're at this scale, when we've got this much going on at these locations, we need to start putting stronger regulation in terms of the number of animals that are allowed in these facilities, especially when we talk about what caused this fire. We're talking about methane from waste, basically. We need to do more in terms of policing these facilities to make them safer.
Anna, Jeff makes a good point about how all of our food supply chain eggs are in one basket when it comes to these industrial farms. And there has been, I'd say, at least a decade of outcry about factory farming and trying to divorce ourselves from that to help diversify the supply chain and because of the negative impacts it might have on the climate, as well as the living conditions for animals in these facilities. But, I mean, it's probably well over 10 years that factory farming has been an issue on the top of the pile. But are you surprised that we haven't had as much movement in terms of doing it better?
No, I'm not. I'm not. We just in the last couple of weeks, there have been an insane number of factory fires and explosions. To the point where you just feel like this is white noise to people. It's just like one day in the news cycle, but besides this, right, which was like very horrifying and just this huge number and got a lot of attention in the the Palmer chocolate plant in Pennsylvania as well. That was a really horrific ordeal. But there was also an ethanol plant explosion in Nebraska this week. One person was killed. There were 4 injuries. There was a fire at an Indiana recycling plant that you probably saw some footage of that. That burned for 2 days and was so toxic it forced 2,000 nearby evacuations.
Yeah, they're still drinking bottled water. Yeah,
it's just and what was sad to me was like the other notable event that occurred this past week is that we marked the 10-year anniversary of the West Texas fertilizer plant explosion that killed 15 people and injured hundreds of other people and was one of the most horrifying industrial accidents in recent history. And while the fire at that plant in Texas was thought to be deliberately set, it was the storage of hazardous chemicals that resulted in the extent to which this was so deadly and damaging to the site and then the surrounding area. But no suspects have ever been identified. They've never caught the person who they blame for potentially setting this fire. And to think about that in the context of today, it was just like a depressing moment to consider, like how, I don't know, you want to say like, hey, at least we learned something. It was 10 years ago. And yet like we don't have better practices in place, like here's this fire in Dimmitt. There's already calls for more detail on why this massive number of animals was in such proximity that they weren't separated to the point where they weren't all completely taken out by this fire. I read an article in the BBC that quoted Ali Granger, who's a policy associate for AWI's farm animal program. And she called for common sense fire safety measures to be adopted by farms, adding that, quote, it's hard to imagine anything worse than being burned alive. Like common sense fire safety measures, like not putting 60 tons of ammonium nitrate in an old wooden housing in West Texas. It's like the same lack of common sense 10 years later. I hate to think that we've made no progress since then, but you have to admit, like, there's still a lot of companies, I think, that are like operating on a knife's edge, hoping that nothing happens, or like assuming that nothing will happen. And complaining at the same time that, regulatory overreach is limiting their ability to operate. But this kind of stuff you can't come back from. It's frustrating to see because, your question is a good one. Yeah. I feel like there's still a lot of bad practices happening out there.
No, I agree. And Jeff, I was actually surprised, and maybe you'll still bring it up, but with a lot of these stories, you always bring up about how the margins are so slim, and so there is a lot of, when people don't make changes, Anna, you talk about, have we not learned anything? And I think that we've learned a lot, but we've done nothing. And as a result, it has breeded these conspiracy theories because the food industry is suffering from a rash of conspiracy theories. And why do you think we have conspiracy theories? Because the people coming up with them are like, well, there's no way this has been going on for 20 years and they did nothing about it. It must be sabotage. So the Castro County Sheriff's Office came out and said there's no evidence of foul play. And the current conspiracy theory landscape, I'm pretty sure, is why they had to put out a statement that sounded like this. The Texas State Fire Marshal's Office and I want to reassure everyone that this is not the result of any type of terroristic attack or any type of event caused to interrupt the milk supply. This was a tragic accident that unfortunately critically injured one person and caused the death of over 17,000 cattle. That is a statement that has to be made because we have learned plenty but done nothing. And it's, do you disagree with that, Jeff?
I think it's dangerous when you lump one facility in with an entire industry. Okay. Can more continue to be done? Yes. Okay. And we should more be done. But again, there's still these overwhelming consumer pressures. You touched on it. Yeah. We want people to operate better and more safely, but then we balk when prices go up. Yeah. Okay. So when I'm not justifying an unsafe practice, which is what I do feel was going on at this dairy, is it a dairy? It's not a dairy farm.
It was a dairy farm.
Dairy.
It was a dairy. Yeah.
So yes, they should have been managing this waste much more effectively than what they were. The fact that there was only one person, as good as that is, that's probably part of the issue. There should have been more individuals recharged with this responsibility because you are talking about a horribly flammable gas that is a byproduct of these animals and their waste. So it's that constant teetering between, we want these businesses in place because we want their products and we want them at a better price, but then what are we doing to support safe practices? Some of it's on them. Some of it does need to be from a regulatory perspective. And a lot of it is, I agree with you, applying what we already know. Yeah. We go to, there's other ways to also improve factory farming. And I don't know how deep we want to get into this, but one of the best processes is treating the animals better because then they grow larger and you don't need as many to get the same output. Yeah. Now that's an oversimplification, but it is part of the solution as well. Yeah. There's also better feed you can give animals to cut down on methane emissions. Yeah. So all of these things combined is where we need to go. I just don't like to lump potentially one facility, one location who is doing it wrong and saying the whole industry is corrupt.
Right.
No. I
Yeah.
don't think we're either of us are saying that. It's frustrating to see, like, in 2023, 5 industrial fires in the same week. And then we're talking about this plant that, like, 10 years ago was supposed to be a wake-up call. And it just doesn't feel like that. You know, I know that every operation is completely different. I don't think that everyone in the world operates this way. It was a hard time to look back at that tragedy in West Texas and think, like, wow, this stuff is still going on such a regular basis.
Well, in this in particular, we could bring up the topic of fire suppression, right? So it was a woman who was the farmhand who was critically injured. She was actually trapped inside the facility when the explosion happened, but firefighters were able to get her out. And like I said, she has been released from the hospital. Now, according to Sid Miller, I believe it was Sid Miller, who is the Texas Agriculture Commissioner, he said that it was some type of hydraulic fluid that caught fire, and the dairy hand tried to put out the fire, but the extinguisher couldn't get there, and the fire consumed the entire barn in less than 5 minutes.
Oh.
Wow.
So, again, there are extinguishing products out there that maybe could have put out the fire before the entire barn went up. According to Sid Miller, he says that this was a state-of-the-art dairy barn, that it was climate controlled, the cows had their own mattresses, and it was less than 3 years old. Just crazy that it's less than 3 years old and still a fire could consume the entire thing that quickly. The livestock loss, as I guess if you want to look at a possible pro, won't disturb grocery store milk prices because this facility was mostly making milk that was used to make powdered milk that was likely exported. Also, I don't know how much we want to get into it, but like the disposal is going to be a problem. And they just were approved to be able to bury all the animals. And that is going to be a time-consuming, horrible process. All right. Well, before we move on to In Case You Missed It, we have another word from our sponsor. Hi, I'm David Manti with Industrial Equipment News. Selecting the right hoses to keep your workers safe and facilities operational is crucial, but not all hoses are created equal. So, to help us work it out, Doug Nordstrom, hose product manager at Swagelok, is going to help us figure it out. Tuesday, May 23rd at 1 p.m. Central, please join us live. So, Doug, I heard that you can get lightning bolts in hoses. Is that true? And is that something we're going to discuss?
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people aren't aware of something called static dissipation, especially through softer material hoses like Teflon. It's a very common failure, and it actually is a lightning bolt that shoots through the hose, causing leakage.
No one wants that.
No one wants that.
And we're going to figure it out May 23rd. It's a Tuesday at 1 p.m. Central. Register now to join us live. That's right. Our sponsor this week was just more me. Sorry about that. But we're talking hoses on May 23rd at 1 p.m. and I want you to be there. Let's talk lightning hoses. It's going to be cool. All right. On to In Case You Missed It. The stories that maybe not as popular this week, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. I'm going to go first, and I picked something that was maybe not that popular, but as I read it, could be significant and a different way of doing things. So basically, I chose the story about a company that's shopping a $200 million Midwest aluminum rolling slab facility. So Metal X and Mana Capital Partners recently announced plans to invest more than $200 million in a new aluminum rolling slab facility in Northeast Indiana, Northwest Ohio, or Southern Michigan. Each year, this facility is going to produce 220 million pounds of ultra-low carbon aluminum rolling slab with a higher percentage of recycled content than currently available. The factory is going to make alloys for the beverage, packaging, and auto industries, and to some extent, industrial and specialty markets. The plant could be fully operational by the first half of 2026 and create some 100 jobs. The rolling slab facility will anchor the development of a $300 million greenfield recycling campus where innovative closed-loop recycling solutions support the aluminum industry's sustainability goals. I picked this story because I thought it kind of played into a lot of things that we've talked about before, where it's like, hey, we've got $200 million now. We got another $100 million coming. Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, where are you at? What do you got?
Who wants it?
Yeah, who wants it? Who's coming for it? I think it checks a lot of boxes regarding sustainability, but I think there are a lot of inherent risks when it comes to recycling facilities. So I can understand, they're not the prettiest to look at either. Yeah. So I could understand if there was a little hesitation. But I don't know if you guys had a chance to check out the story. I found it interesting that they were just like, you know what? We don't know where we're going, but we got a good deal. And, we have a state-of-the-art process, and it's going to be sustainable. So who's got a spot for us? Jeff, what'd you think of what Metal X is trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing there when you talk about a recycling plant, that's sort of one of those things everybody champions until it's in their backyard.
Oh, yeah.
They're not real thrilled about that. Rightfully so. I mean, there is a legacy. There's some history there that it's always been the greatest environmental neighbors.
Yeah.
But I think it is an interesting approach in terms of these folks saying, we're going to do this. Where do you want us to go, essentially? Yeah. The only problem with that is, what if somebody comes back and says, pass?
Yeah.
I mean, that could be awkward too. Where are these folks? Do you know where they're like based out of? Or?
They are a family. So it's a family-owned company, Metal X. And I can't remember where they're. They're based out of Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Okay, so they're staying in their wheelhouse. I think it's also smart in terms of when you look at that location, in terms of just getting the raw materials that they're looking to recycle. It's ideal. I mean, you want to be somewhere there in the middle of America, in terms of getting everything. So this will be another one of these, kind of like when we talk about Billerud. Quite honestly, it's interesting to see now. The follow-up is going to be even more intriguing to see where they do land and who welcomes them. But these types of facilities are going to become more and more important going forward.
Yeah.
It'll be also interesting. I think there's a huge opportunity. And granted, this is outside of their wheelhouse, but a lot of these recyclers are also going to be looking at a lot of different types of materials coming in from the automotive sector and how they potentially adjust to that.
Anna, I like the idea of shopping this facility, but then we ran the story about the fire at the plastics factory, a recycling factory, but it was plastics. Mm-hmm. And then, if you remember, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, about 2 miles down the road, a recycling facility caught fire in Madison as well and burned for like 2 days. Mm-hmm. So I can understand if there's a little bit of an apprehension of wanting to bring this to your community.
Yeah, they're kind of playing an interesting game here because a lot of times these types of discussions are sort of closed door, and they're sort of putting it out there for some attention, potentially media, maybe so the public can apply pressure, but that pressure could easily go the other way also.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting to see what happens here and how these the politicians and the economic development people kind of handle this, because they're really sort of being put on the spot. And if this goes well for Metal X, maybe other companies will start to do this too. I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see if any of those economic development agencies kind of turn their nose up to this. Because like, whoa, that's not how we do business in this state. Jeff, what's your in case you missed it this week?
So a little bit of self-promotion. I picked an interview I did with Drew Yopel from Foresight. They're a company that actually focuses on safety compliant or OSHA compliance and workplace safety. And what's also interesting is he used to work at OSHA.
Oh, great.
So the focus was really on some of the new things that OSHA has come up with from a fine perspective. That's one of the things that we've always talked about. OSHA doesn't have enough teeth. The highest level of fine that OSHA is now handing out as of January 2023 is like $15,625. That's the highest level for an individual unique fine. Now, that doesn't sound in some cases like enough, but it was only $7,000 in 2015. Yeah. So there has been an exponential scale up in terms of what they're doing. We also got into a little bit of conversation in terms of why isn't OSHA doing more? How are they handling a lot of the inspections that were not done during the pandemic for obvious reasons? And one of the great points that Drew made was OSHA is stretched very, very thin. I did not realize this. I did not realize when we think about OSHA from a manufacturing perspective, okay? Just to use round numbers, there's around 250,000 facilities, okay, manufacturing facilities in the U.S. OSHA also has to deal with hospitals and schools and work sites and everything else you can imagine. Even this office building, OSHA, we need to be in OSHA compliance with things here. So if you just looked at manufacturing, he says there's roughly 1,850 OSHA inspectors in the U.S. So just for manufacturing, that is 135 facilities per OSHA inspector.
It's a lot.
Now, even if they somehow rotate that on an annual basis, there's no way you can get to every facility with an account. And that's just manufacturing.
Yeah.
That's not including everything else. He actually spelled it out exponentially. It's one compliance officer for every 70,000 workers at facilities that need to be in OSHA compliance.
That doesn't seem sufficient.
No, there's definitely an issue. So then you talk about, okay, so how do we get OSHA these funds? And one of the things that he brought up was the same thing we've talked about. You need to scale these fines in terms of corporate company size. Right now, if you're a smaller company and you're maxed out in terms of what you're fined, it can be less than that 15.6 based on the number of people working there. Yeah. But it's never going to be more than that. Yeah. That's how we can potentially almost have OSHA self-fund themselves by raising, if Amazon gets fined $60,000 for 4 fines at $15,000, that's nothing for them. Yeah. But if you start to put different parameters in place in terms of the larger the facility, the bigger the company, the larger the fine, maybe then we can get more inspectors out there and start reinforcing some of these things that we want in terms of safety. We're just talking about these factory farms and how they're growing and continue to grow and get bigger. And we want to put in more regulations, prevent more of these fires. Maybe this is an option. So I thought it was a really interesting interview. He offers a different perspective in terms of being a former OSHA employee, inspector, and now working sort of in the private sector. That
is a really unique perspective. And, just a hands down fantastic job done by the interviewer.
He's good looking too.
I don't think it could have been any better. Also, I think when Amazon gets fined $60,000 from OSHA, they just ask for them to pick it up in petty cash on the way out the door.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Anna, what did you think of Jeff's piece on the fine line in safety?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's good to see those fines starting to go up. They've gone up quite a bit more in the last couple of years than they had for a long time. So that's like a good step in the right direction. But I agree, the fines are pretty much useless if they're not punitive. And they're not punitive if they're just a tiny drop in the bucket for a huge corporation.
Anna, what was your in case you missed it this week?
So I picked a story on a rechargeable battery that's made from food. This is definitely usually more in your wheelhouse, David.
Yeah.
I kind of took a risk here.
It's a great story.
Yeah, but it was so interesting when I saw it. I was like, well, we got to cover this. So a team of researchers at the Istituto Italiano di Tecnologica,
Italian Institute of Technology.
Well done. Likely. Sure.
Yeah.
Has created a completely edible and rechargeable battery starting from materials that are normally consumed as part of our daily diet. So it's a proof of concept battery cell. It's been described in a paper that was published in a journal. And it talks about the possible applications, including health diagnostics, food quality monitoring, and edible soft robotics. So the battery cell operates at 0.65 volts, a voltage low enough not to create problems in the human body when it's ingested. This example, it's fully rechargeable. It's the first one ever made. They say it would open the doors to new edible electronic applications. So like monitoring food storage conditions. Interesting use case. They're talking about maybe using it in children's toys where there's a very high risk of ingestion because that's become a thing with these coin batteries. Yeah. Kids will pull them out. And so I don't know. It was a really interesting development, I thought. Maybe the thing that leads to the thing down the line. But people will be afraid of it for sure.
Definitely.
I think that's the biggest obstacle in consumer products. That will be getting over that fear because I don't know about swallowing a battery just like casually. But for medical, I think that this is incredible. And I think that that's like a much sooner timeline, right? So it like really is opening some doors for like non-invasive testing and with things like edible soft robotics. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that rather eat a battery than have a colonoscopy. I'm just guessing like.
No, it's definitely a better entry point.
Yeah. And cut. We have done it.
It is.
What'd you think, David?
No, I think it's a cool point. I honestly, it's kind of a sad point, but I never thought of using these types of edible batteries in children's toys because they're inevitably going to eat them. I looked at purely the medical applications for this because not just in diagnostics, but also in pharmaceutical or drug delivery.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I thought it could be really cool. I mean, we joke about it, but if you could definitely check out the GI tract with the edible battery, it beats other options.
It does.
Jeff, swallow any coin batteries lately?
Not lately.
Oh, okay.
Not lately. Yeah, really interesting in terms of just improving like the waste stream, and in terms of fewer toxic materials and things like that. Also, the one thing I do wonder about though, from a storage perspective, being able to maintain power load and in terms of supplying power to some of these devices that are going to be really important if we're talking about medical and medical
applications.
Yeah, I was trying to think of medicine delivery.
Drug delivery. Yeah,
drug delivery type application. So it'll be interesting to see as they play it out. But it's always encouraging to see this type of technology being championed and pushed forward. I mean, this is how we get to those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. So it's vitamin B2 used as an anode, a food supplement found in capers as the cathode. I mean, this is activated charcoal to increase electrical conductivity. That's incredible. It's
really
just
is.
incredible.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to final thoughts before we get out of here this week. Anna, do you have a final thought for us?
Yeah. So I took a trip this week. I got on an airplane for the first time since 2019. And I thought maybe something would have changed, but nothing has. So
actually, when you were gone, they made him like a little bit narrower in between seats, but that's about it.
I sat by an 80-year-old man, which I always do, and he told me some dirty jokes, and I was just like, "This is an airplane ride. This is the same, yeah."
This is the glamorous episode of business travel. This is what it is.
I mean, Delta gives you 2 bags of almonds now, which is like awesome. Thank you, Delta. But that's
and the options.
The only thing that's
Almonds,
changed.
cookies, granola bars.
I
My
know.
goodness, Delta, you're spoiling us.
I know.
The Delta cookies are one of the best, though.
Oh yeah,
The Biscoff cookies,
Yes.
yeah. So anyway, that was like I forgot like how I don't know, like we had a bunch of turbulence on the way home, and I was like, oh, I forgot about this part of it, like, but I made it. So
was it a good show?
it was a good show. I was at the Industrial Supply Association annual convention. It was a really great show. Tons of great companies there. We had a lot of good discussions. People are excited about what they're doing, and so are we. So it was a good show.
My final thought this week is just that we have started home shopping, looking to potentially move into a new area, a little bit more space for the family. And I just want to know how anyone with both partners, full-time jobs, and any children ever do anything other than keep each other alive. Because it's like, yeah, do you want to go see this house? Sure. When? It's very difficult. So I give a lot of credit to people that have more patience than me, basically. Because by the time I show up to the showing, it's just like, oh, whatever. Yeah, it looks fine. Is it standing? Let's move. It's just it's really difficult when you have a couple of full-time parents and kids just to kind of do anything outside of your day-to-day. And just giving credit to anybody doing it out there, a little positive reinforcement. You're doing a great job. Just keep your head up. And, maybe you'll be able to move. And then don't ever think of the prospect of packing and moving boxes. Because it's like,
Yeah.
you never really, or at least I never really took inventory of everything that we have in the house until you start imagining it all in a box. You're like, we got to start selling everything now.
Hey, yeah, good thing you got rid of that treadmill.
Yeah.
There you go.
That was,
Silver lining.
once this idea started getting floated was when I started walking around the house with my phone, just like selling it. Also, flakes on Marketplace will never get better. So you either have to be a patient person or just put it on the side of the road for free. If anyone knows any better options other than Marketplace, please email me, because I might just set fire to the rest of my stuff. Because I mean, just in terms of the stuff we're trying to get rid of.
Not another fire, David.
Sorry, yeah, let's not joke about fires. I'll bury it.
There you go.
All right. I'll give it away to a good home. Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
So a little bittersweet this weekend. My daughter, who's graduating from high school, is doing her final play.
Oh.
And it is Into the Woods. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah.
So you're familiar.
Into the Woods.
Because I think it's kind of polarizing. Because it's sort, if you remember, it's sort of a parody of fairy tales, but then it kind of gets dark at the end.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
It's okay.
I just did not get that turn. Like, it feels like people either like it or they don't. Like, there's no real middle ground.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was
no spoilers.
surprised that they were doing this as a high school play, to be honest.
At least your daughter's high school still has the artistic freedom to make a play of substance.
All right.
And it
Great
not
commentary.
be attacked. No, Into the Woods is, it's a good show. It is kind of, so is that the last of the kids that are doing theater?
No, my youngest daughter is still on crew, so she'll be doing it next year. But yeah, this is number 2's last one.
Oh, man.
Yeah, kind of bittersweet. But
Do
so
we-
that's what we got going on this weekend.
Oh, you're
We're
going
not
to the
moving.
show. You're going to the show this weekend.
At least twice. Yeah.
Oh, all right.
So
Okay. Like, do you go to the first one and then in the second one start heckling for the understudy? Just like, let's see Carol in there.
once, and then you can imagine how that went.
They asked you out.
Yeah.
How did the poll question end up last week?
So everybody kind of had this similar reaction to the poll question, which was, where does the government need more or better oversight or support, whether it's global initiatives or domestic? Everybody basically said the government's screwed up everywhere, so wherever you can give them help, the better.
Okay.
But we did have a couple of pretty good comments, one of which came from Clint. He said the U.S. really has too large a footprint for this to be an either or for him. He would say global initiative simply because the global stage has the potential for more dynamic changes. We're also seeing a lot of that going on right now with some of the trade embargoes and sanctions and things like that. He said domestically, we have multiple government entities to watch over commercial activities, but the U.S. really needs to be able to walk and eat jelly beans at the same time. So kind of an appreciate there. And really everybody else went the other way. They said we should focus more on things from a domestic perspective.
All right.
So appreciate everybody's feedback there.
I mean, I understand that because any story that we run about the U.S. lending any sort of support to any other government, and they're just like, what about our problems? It's like, yes, but there are problems everywhere.
Well, and we were just talking about OSHA having one inspector for every 70,000 workers. So yeah, we do have some problems here internally to figure out.
I feel like we should at least have that. Just cut it down to 1 in 35,000, and we're gonna make a lot of hand
We'll do a little better, right?
Yeah.
All right. Moving on. The point question for this week. I thought, the AI conversation we had about the beer was kind of interesting. So real simply, should we embrace or fear artificial intelligence? And also the second part, what's the best application for it? Is it product development, like we talked about here? Maybe it's plant maintenance and sort of doing some predictability type of things, safety in terms of looking forward and what could be potential safety issues down the line and preparing for them better. Operations, we've talked about digital twins and other simulations that can help point out efficiencies. Supply chain management, like Anna alluded to, or if you've got some other idea. But what's the best application for artificial intelligence in the industrial sector?
I mean, with product development and tying in additive manufacturing, because we talk about how current design engineers can't even design for additive manufacturing to use it at its full potential. I feel like there's a lot there. I also like that the question is, should we embrace or fear AI? And once we accept its inevitability, how should we use it? All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletters, get it delivered to your inbox first, and subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine. Join us for the live chat and as we do this live. All right, for Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we'll see you next week.